Let's now do a walkthrough review of some sections and some questions within the Edexcel Geography B paper 2. This is from 2021. If you haven't already got a copy of that paper in front of you, good idea to pause the video and get hold of that. It's available on a whole variety of different websites. So have that there in front of you, and we're going to go through not all of the questions on the paper. It will take too long, but we are going to do some more of the tricky questions. So take them as learning points. You might already know a lot of this stuff already, but be useful to go over. And obviously pause the video at any point. Probably the first thing to say is again, to remind you guys of how this paper is structured. So there are three sections. There is a section A, which is physical landscape, section B, which is human landscape. You are to complete both those sections. So that's pretty obvious. We've done those two topics almost separately, but obviously there are some lap over as well. The third part of that paper is around fieldwork, and this is where you've got some options. We've got to make sure we're answering the right thing. So section A, section B, do both. Section C, section C1, you have a choice of coasts. So investigating coastal processes like longshore drift, coastal management, features of erosion. Things that if you visited the coast, you would have done this type of investigation. If you visited a river, then you'll be looking at probably measuring channel characteristics, the depth, velocity, and how rivers change downstream. So that's your fieldwork options under C1. In C2, it will either be an investigation of urban areas, so looking perhaps at environmental quality, urban rebranding, quality of life is one that a lot of schools will do, or you'll look at rural settlements, so investigating how land use changes, impacts on tourism, rural depopulation. So that's question 11. So you will either do coastal rivers or urban areas or rural settlements. So one from C1 and one from C2. Okay, let's look at the first question. Really, question like this, lots of big diagrams, talks about rock type, resistant rock. So just take your time on this one. Easy to make a mistake, but it's to really just to ground you in these are the types of questions you're going to do next. So this is obviously in southeastern England. These are the North Downs and the South Downs. You can see here. So these coloured layers, they represent different rock types that are beneath the surface. So when we need to answer this question, you need to identify a resistant rock that forms a higher ground. Which one of the following is a resistant rock forming higher grounds? So the first clue really is the shape of the landscape. So the highest parts of this cross section is the North Downs and the South Downs. So these areas are in yellow, either side there. Next, we can use the key to identify the rock type. So the yellow is obviously the chalk. So this makes sense geographically. We know chalk is a relatively resistant sedimentary rock, and over millions of years, these softer rocks around it have been eroded more quickly, which is leaving the chalk standing at higher land. So the correct answer is chalk. Question B. Identify which one of the following is the best definition of weathering. So this is a good one. You get either a weathering question or an erosion question, so knowing the difference is absolutely key. Slightly different definitions and depends on how you've been taught. So definition that we use, weathering is the decomposition and disintegration of rocks in situ. So close to the answer of C, the breakdown or dissolving of rocks on the surface. Erosion is the process where material is worn away and transported. Question C. Explain one reason why sedimentary rocks are usually eroded faster than igneous rocks. Only 2-mark question, but I'm going to give you a succinct kind of answer. Well, it is a succinct answer that you'll be able to reproduce, and I'll give you sort of a different style one as well. So sedimentary rocks erode faster than igneous rocks because they are less consolidated, like packed together. They contain natural weaknesses such as joints and bedding planes, and these are the weaknesses that allow water to penetrate the rock more easily, increasing erosion. Now another maybe more simple version, which will still get you 2 marks. Sedimentary rocks are less resistant. They contain joints, bedding planes. Water can enter the rocks the weaknesses in the rocks, causing the rock to erode more quickly than igneous rock. So a bit more complicated in terms of the wording in the top option there. You may feel comfortable to do that, that's fine, but also the sort of simplified version as well. Okay, question 2. This is about coastal change and conflict. Studying figure 2, which shows information about the percentage of coastline being eroded and coastal protection for selected UK coastal regions. Identify which one of the regions has the highest percentage of coastline being eroded. So, giving you the option here on the right hand side, so where it is, it's Yorkshire and Humberside, but the really sort of the key point here is just to make sure you're not overwhelmed by lots of data, make sure you're picking the right data. So that's this one here. Yorkshire and Humberside, and of course this is the Holderness Coast. Maths in geography question, calculate the length of the Scottish coastline being protected. Answer to 1 decimal place. Show you're working in the space below. So this is a 2-mark question. What it's asking is the percentage, so in this case 6.6% of the total coastline, which is 11,154. You do have calculators in your exam as well. So 66 times 11,154 divided by 100 and to 1 decimal place. Suggest one reason why only a small percentage of the Scottish coastline is being protected. I'm going to use this opportunity to recap some things about the geology of Scotland, because we need to understand a little bit about that. So Scotland has some of the oldest rocks in the United Kingdom. So much of the north and west of Scotland is made up of hard, resistant, igneous, metamorphic rocks, such as granite. So these rocks are very difficult for the waves to erode. So this is different from many parts of southern and eastern England, where there's more sedimentary rocks such as clay, chalk, sandstone. These are more common in these areas and they are eroded more easily. So Scotland has a rugged coastline with many cliffs, islands, remote areas. Large parts of the coastline are sparsely populated, which we'll get into in a moment, meaning there are few homes, businesses, roads, infrastructure that need protecting. In addition, parts of Scotland are still experiencing isostatic uplift. So this means that the land is rising following the melting ice sheets after the ice age. So in some places the coastline is advancing rather than retreating. So these are factors that help explain why only a small percentage of the coastline has defences. So to recap all that, we've got hard igneous metamorphic rocks, we've got slow rates of erosion, low population density, isostatic uplift, and therefore less need for expensive coastal defences. So as I say, 2-mark question, lots of information I've given you there. Could easily be a 4-mark question, or could easily be a question more detailed around the geology of Scotland. So I've given you 3 options as to how you might answer this question, which will cover you if you were to get this question in a 3 or 4 marks. So you may want to pause this for a second and just have a look through those answers. So staying with our cliffs, this is a nice question explaining how coastal erosion processes create cliffs. You may use a diagram to help your answer. So no marks for the diagram itself, but obviously useful to do. If you've been taught by me, we do quite a few diagrams. We've probably drawn something like this. So think about erosional processes. So erosional processes include abrasion, so the waves throwing pebbles and rocks against the cliff, wearing them away. Attrition, so these are rocks crashing into each other. Solution and hydraulic action. And if you're thinking about how you're going to remember that, AASH, ash. That's a good way to remember that. Okay, let's go back to that question then. to answer questions like this, in even within physical geography, you can often tell a story, tell a sequence. So let's think about the waves, what they're doing. They're eroding the base of the coast through hydraulic action, through abrasion. Next stage, this creates a wave cut notch. This is through the exploitation of the weaknesses in the rock. The rock becomes unstable and collapses under gravity. So over time, repeated erosion, collapse, creates a steep cliff and cause it to retreat. So remember, the questions like this, examiners are looking for process rather than lots of separate facts. Here's a model answer to review. Waves erode the base of the coastline through hydraulic action and abrasion. These processes exploit weaknesses such as joints and cracks in the rock, creating a wave cut notch. As the notch becomes larger, the overhanging rock becomes unstable and collapses due to gravity. Repeated erosion and collapse cause a steep cliff to form and gradually retreat inland. Question 3. One, river processes and pressures. So before we answer this question, it's worth having a look at this diagram just as an overview, not part of your exam, what you were doing in the exam, but just as a learning point, really. So this is the map of the river in North Yorkshire. So the most obvious feature is obviously the river itself. This flows across a broad, flat valley floor. You notice the large bend in the river at point X. So we can surmise there, therefore you're going to be asked a question on that. So this is called a meander, and we know that meanders are formed mainly in the middle and lower course of the river. So if we didn't have other characteristics and features that would help us identify that, i.e. sewage works, i.e. the Ellenthal Hall, we've got the actual shape of the river. So all this land here appears quite flat. There are a few contour lines. There's a spot height near the hall here. It's only 16 meters above sea level, but obviously a bit lower here. So along the river banks we can see some deciduous trees, so there's some natural vegetation. There's also a public footpath, so maybe the valley is used for some leisure and recreation. So human features, mentioned Ellenthal Hall just now, got that. We got the sewage works here. So this is a lowland river landscape. We've got meanders, we've got floodplains, we've got farmlands, vegetation, and some scattered rural developments over here. Okay, let's have a look at the question now. Identify which one of the following is the best description of the river feature located at X. Nice easy question for our river questions here. That's a meander. Okay, next one. Explain one reason why Ellenthal Hall is less at risk from river flooding than point X on the map. This is often about height, so we can see that Ellenthal Hall is less at risk because it's located on a slightly higher ground than point X. The spot height near the hall is 16 meters. We had a look at that just a moment ago, just there. Whereas point X is situated on the low-lying floodplain next to the river. Question B. Explain 2 reasons why human activity can cause river flooding. It's an often asked question. Let's think about urbanization and deforestation. That's usually covered in that sense. So our urbanization example here, buildings, towns, cities create concrete surfaces that stop water soaking into the ground so more water flows into rivers more quickly. So it's about urbanisation. When land is covered with roads, roofs, pavements, rainwater can't seep into the ground. It runs over the surface, increasing surface runoff, increasing the volume of water and discharge within the river. Second option, or second reason, is deforestation. There are others, but these are the two main ones you should be easy to talk about. So cutting down trees reduces interception. More rainwater reaches the river and can cause flooding. Question 4. What I've done on this slide is outline all the questions from the papers that will have gone previously, and given my own sense of kind of where they fit them. Most of them should be physical, but there are some bit of a human lap over as well. So this question here for 2021 is the relationship between altitude and population density. So this is your 8-mark question. Quite tricky really, but the overall relationship is that areas of high altitude, so we can see this here, high altitude here. So these areas have low population density, while areas of lower altitude and south-southeast tend to have high population density. So if you look at the Scotland Highlands, for example, Scotland Highlands, Wales, the Pennines, these are all areas of high altitude. You can see there on figure B. And when we compare these locations to figure 4A on the left hand side, we can see that they generally have low population densities. Now, in contrast to that, if you look at, again, 4B, many of the UK's densely populated areas, London of course, the obvious, South East Midlands, some parts of central Scotland, they have a higher population density. So lowland areas also have better agricultural land, so there are some exceptions to that around in East Anglia as well. So there's lots of ways you could possibly answer this question. When we're talking about relationships, the best thing to ground yourself in how you answer these questions is to talk about whether it's a negative, positive, or no relationship, obviously negative or positive. Then provide some evidence, then provide some explanation, some counter evidence because it's an assess question, and then your final assessment. So that's section A. Now section B includes a 7-mark question, sorry, 8-mark question, and I'm going to show you that in a second, all the different types, and then you've got dynamic UK cities, which is 11 marks, then you've got investigating UK geographical issue. The 7-mark questions look like this, so we won't do any of these here. We're just going to move straight on to the last section of coastal fieldwork, section C1, and then we'll stop there. So these are the questions that you'll see for the the human geography 8-mark question. So you get a chance to review those, it'd be a good idea. Let's move on to section C1. So this is where students will have the option between within C1 either coast or rivers. So a group of students decided to measure beach profiles at Amroth, Pembrokeshire to help them collect data for their inquiry question, which was: does hard engineering, such as groins and seawalls, affect the beach morphology? So, size and shape of the beach. They selected 3 places to measure their beach profile, shown on figure 8 below, and measured beach gradient and sediment size every 50 metres from the top of the beach to the sea. First 2-mark question. Suggest one reason why the student selected this beach to carry out their fieldwork. So remember, start with the inquiry question. The inquiry question is asking whether hard engineering affects beach morphology. Therefore, the most important clue on this map is that there are coastal defensives present. So if you want to investigate the impact of groin seawalls, you need to be at a beach where these features actually exist. That's probably the most obvious. You could also gain some marks here by talking about practical reasons such as accessibility. So this map shows roads, paths, a car park as well, right in the centre. So easy to park, easy to get access to the beach. Now, when you're answering questions like this, think about your own coastal field trip. Imagine arriving at the beach with your classmates, teachers. Where did you go? You'd obviously need somewhere safe, easy to access, has the features, of course, that you're investigating. In our fieldwork I've done most recently with my students, we've gone to Bexhill on the Sea. We selected locations where we could observe processes and management strategies, so the same principle applies here. Okay, let's show you a couple of options. Again, just 2-mark question, but an opportunity for me to point out the different ways you can answer this question. Next question, similar approach really. Suggest one reason the students selected the 3 locations shown on the figure to carry out their beach profiles. So the students selected 3 locations so they can compare beach profiles at different points along the beach. This would help them identify whether engineering structures were affecting beach morphology in the different areas. 8C. Explain one reason why the chosen location of beach profile 1 might not be a good choice. So I've added the OS map key. You won't have this, you won't need it, but there are a few things you should know and remember. Outcrops, loose rock scree maybe as well. So we can see this profile starts under a cliff. So beach 1 profile under a cliff. So it might be dangerous environment. 8D. Suggest 2 reasons why coastal erosion may not be a serious risk on this particular coastline. So there's quite a few things going on this line, that helps us with that. Well, let's look how wide the beach is. This means that waves lose energy as they travel across the beach, reducing the erosion of the cliffs and the coastline behind it. We've got the groins, so groins are present along the coast. These trap sediment maintain a wide beach that absorbs wave energy and reduces erosion. And then on the western side, we've got the wave cut platform here. So this causes waves to break further offshore, reducing their energy before reaching the actual cliff itself. So that question there, that ends C1 section of the C section of your field work, and the next thing for you to do is to choose either urban areas or rural settlements from C2. Best of luck.